A Russian scientist pulls a mammoth bone from frozen ground. It's still warm. The skull feels fresh, like the animal was breathing moments ago. But this mammoth died 4,000 years ago, when the Egyptian pyramids were already ancient monuments. Everyone believed woolly mammoths vanished 10,000 years ago with the Ice Age. Every textbook said so. Every museum display confirmed it. But Sergei Vartanyan was holding proof that everything we knew about extinction was completely wrong. Welcome to one of science's most incredible discoveries, the secret population of mammoths that refuse to die. Wrangel Island sits 87 miles north of Siberia, floating in the Arctic Ocean like a frozen fortress. It's roughly the size of Delaware, shrouded in fog, battered by 140-mile-per-hour winds. This place is basically nature's prison, except it was keeping something extraordinary alive inside. When the Ice Age ended 12,000 years ago, rising seas cut Wrangel off from mainland Siberia. A small group of mammoths found themselves trapped on this island. Maybe 500 animals, perhaps 1,000 at most. That's fewer mammoths than students in a typical high school. And they were the only ones left on Earth. But here's what makes this story absolutely mind-blowing. These weren't desperate creatures barely surviving. Scientific analysis of their bones reveals they were actually thriving right up until the very end. Isotope analysis works like a health report card for ancient animals. The Wrangel mammoths were getting straight A's. Their nitrogen levels showed abundant food. Their carbon signatures revealed no stress or malnutrition. So if they were doing so well, what could possibly have killed them all? The answer gets really weird when you look at their DNA. When scientists finally extracted genetic material from these last mammoths, they discovered something that redefined our understanding of extinction. These animals weren't just the final members of their species. They were walking genetic disasters. Let me explain how messed up these creatures had become. A mammoth's trunk contains over 40,000 muscles, like having a Swiss Army knife attached to your face that can smell a flower from miles away. These giants use scent for everything: finding food, recognizing family, detecting danger, choosing mates. The Wrangel mammoths had lost huge sections of genes responsible for smell receptors. Imagine suddenly being unable to taste chocolate, coffee, or pizza. Except for a mammoth, losing smell was like losing their entire social network. Picture the confusion. Mothers unable to recognize their own babies by scent. Males who couldn't detect which females were ready to mate. The complex social systems that had governed mammoth herds for millions of years began breaking down because the animals literally couldn't smell each other anymore. Their communication proteins were corrupted by mutations. The chemical language that allowed mammoth societies to function was deteriorating into gibberish. Most bizarre of all, many developed cream-colored translucent fur. The thick, insulating coat that had protected their species through ice ages was being replaced by something that looked more like silk than survival gear. This is called genomic meltdown. When populations become too small and isolated, harmful mutations accumulate faster than natural selection can eliminate them. Each generation becomes more broken than the last. Here's what makes the Wrangel story so puzzling. By all scientific predictions, these animals should have died out quickly. Genomic meltdown typically drives species extinct within a few hundred generations. But these mammoths kept going for 6,000 years, over 200 generations. The answer might lie in their island prison. With no large predators on Wrangel, the mammoths didn't need perfect senses to survive. With abundant vegetation and no competition, they could afford to be inefficient. The harsh Arctic environment that would have killed damaged animals elsewhere actually protected them. Recent analysis reveals something even more amazing. The most harmful genetic variants were actually being eliminated from the population over time. The Wrangel mammoths weren't slowly dying from genetic damage. They were winning their battle against genomic meltdown. After 6,000 years of isolation, they had stabilized and were beginning genetic recovery, which makes what happened next absolutely devastating. Around 4,000 years ago, something changed on Wrangel Island. Mammoth bones from this period showed dramatically spiked sulfur levels, like a geological crime scene screaming that something went horribly wrong. The most likely explanation involves an innocent-sounding weather event, rain on snow. But don't let the name fool you. This is nature's cruelest trap. Picture an unusually warm winter storm hitting the island, dropping liquid rain onto existing snow. The rain instantly freezes on contact, creating a sheet of ice thick enough to cover the entire island. Suddenly, vegetation that had sustained the mammoths for millennia becomes unreachable, locked beneath impenetrable ice. These animals needed to eat almost constantly, processing hundreds of pounds of plant matter daily. Within weeks, the entire population would have begun starving. This wasn't the end of a failing species. This was the sudden termination of a genetic recovery that had taken millennia to achieve. Here's the part that will break your heart. Just a few hundred years after the last mammoth died, humans arrived on Wrangel Island for the first time. Archaeological evidence shows Paleo-Eskimo hunters established seasonal camps around 3,600 years ago. These weren't mammoth hunters. By then, the giants were already ancient history. They came to hunt birds and marine mammals. But they must have found the bones, skulls scattered across the tundra, some still relatively fresh. The cruel irony is inescapable. If the mammoths had survived just a few more centuries, they would have encountered humans for the first time. Not the sophisticated hunters who drove mainland mammoths extinct, but seasonal visitors with technology designed for much smaller prey. Would the mammoths have survived human contact? We'll never know. But considering they had endured 6,000 years of genetic damage and environmental stress, it's haunting to think they missed coexistence by such a narrow margin. The final mammoth bones carry no signs of trauma, disease, or gradual decline. They simply stop appearing in the geological record. One sediment layer contains mammoth remains. The next contains none. The final population numbered around 300 individuals scattered across 2,900 square miles, unaware they represented their species' entire future. When crisis came, it moved faster than evolution could respond. The last mammoth died alone on that frozen island 4,000 years ago. But here's what still gives me chills. That mammoth had no idea it was the last of its kind. It probably spent final days doing what mammoths always did, looking for food, calling for family, living as if tomorrow was guaranteed. Today, Wrangel Island hosts the world's highest density of polar bear dens. Arctic foxes hunt among mammoth bones. Walruses gather on beaches where giants once walked. The island that preserved the last mammoths for 6 millennia continues as a refuge for Arctic life. The Wrangel mammoths teach us that extinction isn't always gradual decline. Sometimes it's an ambush. Small populations can survive far longer than theory predicts, but remain vulnerable to sudden catastrophic events. Most importantly, they remind us that survival isn't just about numbers or genetic diversity. It's about timing, luck, and the unpredictable nature of environmental change. The difference between extinction and recovery can come down to a single weather event. And maybe that's the most human thing about this entire story. The fragile line between survival and disappearance that connects us all.